realized that I needed to be recording this. So I just started the recording. So I want to do something for us. Oh, I realize why it's muting. When I go to the window, I'm clicking the exact place the mute thing is. I won't do that anymore. So let's see what we can do with reading Genesis 1 1 to 5. So when I read, like every day, this is the setup I have in Logos. I put ACOT here. I put BHS here. I put the textual apparatus here. And then I save the layout. It's not pulling up the... but do you see this little button right here in Logos? That's your layout button. And so if you open up something and you say, hey, this is really useful for me, you can click on that and save it as a named layout. And so, like, I have one that says, like, narrative Hebrew reading and poetry and prophets. And I just try to read through those three sections. And then I save it when I'm done so that when I open it, it opens it right back up to where I was. So I commend that to you if you are using Logos, to use this little button right there to save your layout. So this is the layout I saved for our Hebrew class. So I have ACOT, I have the textual apparatus. If I click on the word, if I double click, see it pulls up the lexicon, and I have that Hebrew, Aramaic, Old Testament, people call it Halot, or if you want to call it Curler Baumgartner, that's what some people call it. But whatever your Hebrew dictionary is, have it there. So I have this opened up. And so what I thought we would do is just like read some. And so Ryan, would you like to start? Just read and point out anything that you find interesting in verse 1.
So we have Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz.
Perfect. And what do you find interesting?
Well, the hashamayim dual.
Yeah, and it is a dual. When you see, he even tells you it's a dual right there. So you're absolutely right. What else do you find interesting?
I suppose this may just be sort of unique grammatical to Hebrew, but that it's really in begins, it's not definite for another reason that I'm missing, but
Yeah, so if it were in the beginning, this would be a patah. Because normally what they do is, like, if you have the definite article, but you put a preposition, the article goes away, but the preposition replaces it. And usually, like, let me see if I can find one for us. Yeah, here. So, the waters, right? So if you wanted to say in the waters, what you would do is take that hey out and you would replace it with the be, But instead of the Shavah, you would keep the Patah and the doubling Dagesh, and that lets you know to say in the waters. And so, Ryan, you're exactly right that if it were in the beginning, you would have a Patah there, but you would do a doubling Dagesh. Well, you can't do a Dagesh in a Resh, so you would lengthen the Patah to a Kametz, and that's not what we have here. We have in beginning. So it raises the question, what do we do with that? So I want to show you a resource that you guys might find helpful. So let me change over to it. You guys still hear me? Okay. So this is called the Daily Dose of Hebrew. And you can sign up and it'll send, if you like those things, every morning about 5:30, it will send you a verse. And right now I think they're going through Psalm 119. And they have 3 people who do it, and they're all, full-time Hebrew professors. One of them's Furtado from RTS Orlando. I think Southern Seminary runs it. But if you go to that website, you can go here, and it has the old videos, And if you go here, it goes to Genesis 1. And it pulls up every daily verse. And I want to play this for you because, one, it will show you what these are like, and you can decide whether or not it would be helpful for you to get it. But I'm pretty sure this is Furtado, and this is what he says about Genesis 1:1.
Genesis 1:1. Bereshit, bara, Elohim, 8, Hashamayim, the haaretz. Bereshit is typically translated in the beginning, but you'll notice that the pronunciation is b with a shva and not ba with a kametz. In other words, there's no definite article here. Were there a definite article, it would need the kametz in front of the resh. So why translate it in the beginning? Well, there is one occurrence of the word mereshit, which does not have the definite article, in Isaiah 46:10, and it's clear that this means from the beginning. We must admit, however, that this is in poetry, and the definite article is much less frequent in poetry. Bara, he created. Call perfect, 3ms from Beit Resh Aleph, and you'll notice the comets under the Resh because the Aleph is silent, so once again we have compensatory lengthening of the Patach to the comets. Elohim is in the plural, God. This plural is honorific. In the Quran, for example, when God is said to be speaking, the pronoun is typically we, plural, not I. 8 is the direct object marker, and it occurs with this spelling only 10% of the time. Most of the time it's spelled with a sagol and is joined to the word that follows with makef. Hashamayim, the heavens, has the definite article on it, hey plus patach, plus the strong dagesh in the first letter of the word. And it's a dual noun. You see that patach, yod, hirek, mem ending, signifying the dual. Haaretz, notice the definite article. Since the aleph does not take the strong dagesh, the patach under the hey becomes comets, compensatory lengthening the earth.
Okay, tell me what you found interesting about that. There were several things like I really found interesting about that. Tell me what you found interesting. Did you pick up that he pronounces 8 differently from the guy on the MP3? Our guy says et, and he said 8, and he's right. It's a seray, and I mean, when I was first learning it, I said 8 Hashemayim, the 8 Haaretz. But then I listened to the guy and he's saying et. But it just kind of underscores the fact that different good scholars are going to pronounce these words differently. I mean, Furtado is one of the best people we have in Hebrew, and he's doing it 8. And the guy on the MP3 is actually a Israeli Jew who was born in Israel, and he does it et. And so I look at myself and I say, no wonder I can't pronounce these words, because good scholars are doing it different. So I thought that was interesting. I also, appreciated that he pointed out that it is indefinite, and he pointed out the dual. But I think he's dead wrong about Elohim being an honorific plural. I think John is reading it as a true plural. And I'm with Warfield. The Old Testament is a lavishly furnished room, dimly lit. And it isn't that, Elohim means the Trinity, but that plural singular interplay means something. And, by the time we get to the New Testament, we realize that it's the plurality within the unity of God. So I disagree with him there, but can you see the value of these? They do these every single day. They do a long one on Saturday. The one on Saturday is about 12 minutes long, and usually it's a different guy who does that. And they explain the accents and weird grammar. They're really good about explaining that. And you can see they've done it for all these verses for 6 chapters in Genesis. I don't know. What do you think? Is that going to be a good resource for you? I think that.
I love it. I can't recommend it highly enough. It does get frustrating. Well, I have the Greek one as well, and when I still can't read stuff, I'm just hoping just every single day. I'm sure it takes more than 2 or 3 minutes a day to get good at it, but maybe it's keeping me from going backwards, at least, if I don't read a lot.
That's exactly the truth. You've got to do something to help your languages not die. And the daily dose is a good thing. For me, I started incorporating it in my devotional time, and I've got a document that I, try to pray through, and that document's in Greek and Hebrew. And man, I love doing that so much. You would pry that out of my cold, dead hands, because it's the biblical theology. I like the languages. I liked it enough to major in it. I've liked it enough to read it every day for 40 years. But I tell you this, I love the biblical theology. And the languages can make the biblical theology just blossom. I'm trying to corrupt you guys into believing that, because if the languages ever get you, you're going to devote massive time to getting the beauty of that biblical theology. And I'm unapologetic about that. That's what I'm trying to do in every language class I've ever taught, because it is so beautiful. Do you see how Akot is hyperlinked to other resources. So if you have the Brown Driver Briggs, like that's the page number where it's going to talk about this. GK, when you're in Hebrew studies, or GKC, sometimes you'll see it, is the main Hebrew grammar called Gesenius Calchin Cowley. What's really cool about that is if you have the resource and you click on the resource, it will take you to the very page. And for some reason, it didn't take me to the English translation, it took me to the German one. But you can make sure that it goes to the right place. But you can see how all of this is hyperlinked. I mean, if you were learning Hebrew 30 years ago, you'd have to have a table full of books. It would take you 50 minutes to, look all this up. Now it's instantaneous. You can go to a coffee shop and do it. So the other thing I wanted to point out is, what do you make of this A right here? Why is there a big A? Okay, that's how they tell us that there's a textual variant. So this is going to be linked to what's called a critical apparatus, meaning, like, if there's a different reading. What we're reading here is manuscript B19A. It's copied in 1008 AD. It's kept in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. This is making no claim to be an eclectic text. When you take Greek and they give you that little blue Bible, that blue Bible is an eclectic text. They've looked at every possible manuscript there is. They've printed exactly what they think was written. I mean, that little blue Bible you can just take to the bank. That was what the apostles wrote. Nobody's claiming that for this. All they're claiming in this is that it's a very faithful copy of one manuscript, which means, well, you tell me, how important will these textual variants be? There are going to be times where the original reading is down here, not here. Which means when you're reading this and you see a textual variant, you need to go down and be able to figure out what it says. Okay, the bad news. They assume that we can read Latin. They assume that we can read abbreviated Hebrew. And they assume that we're completely familiar with all the resources. Okay, show of hands. Is that true of you? Here's where Logos is so great. Anything in blue in the textual apparatus, if you hover over it, it will spell it out for you. So I don't know if this is coming through, but I'm hovering over this and it tells me Origenes. Okay, I know that's Latin. I'm guessing it's Origen's name. It is Origen's name. So Origen had a tool called the hexapla. How many of you have ever heard of the hexapla? Okay, what is it? Okay, in Origen's day, many people were making the argument that Christianity is only true if you read the Septuagint, the Greek translation. But if you read the real Hebrew, it wouldn't support Christianity. Origen knew that wasn't true, and so what he did was he made a book. It was 20,000 pages long. and it had 6 columns. And what he did is he collected every word. He gave the transliteration of that word into Greek. He looked at 3 translations, Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion. Then he wrote down what he thought the Septuagint said, and then he put what the Septuagint in his day said. So he had 6 columns. And that book was so big that it was never copied. There was only one copy of it. But people quoted it, and nobody forwarded that argument anymore that Christianity only was true if you read the Septuagint and not the Hebrew. So what that means is a lot of people will quote the hexapla. And what we have here is Origen's pronunciation of Bereshit. And he did it in Greek words. Can you see that down there? So he did it Bereshith. Now, why is he going Bereshith? Why did we do it Bereshit and he did it Bereshith?
Just ancient versus modern.
It's ancient versus modern. So he did the Begad Kafat. It doesn't have the Dagesh, so he did it with the H. Vel in Latin means or. So Origen either had Bereshit or Bareshit. The Samaritan Pentateuch does it Bereshit. So that textual variant, like the letters are the same, but can you see that this is telling us that the pointing may be different? And if it's Baresaith, then Origen is saying it did have the word "the" in it, in the beginning. And maybe the Samaritan Pentateuch is reading Baresaith. My transliterated Hebrew is terrible, so don't quote me on that. But can you see how important it is to know what this textual apparatus is? This is going to be our friend, so we're going to have to learn how to use it. All right, who would like to do 2 for us? Amanda, would you like to volunteer for that?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay. Ve'haaretz ha'ita tohu vavohu ve'hoshek al panei tehom ve'ruach Elohim merahefit al panei hamayim.
Wow, that's perfect. Okay, what do you find interesting about that?
Well, last week I really, the way you were describing the verb tenses regarding the hovering and what that would imply for the Spirit hovering over the waters, not as a passive hovering, but like an aggressive presence over the waters.
Mm-hmm.
That has stood out to me since we discussed it last week.
That is interesting, isn't it? And and I'm just using BibleWorks because I have to admit I don't know how to do this in Logos. And we'll do um, if we do a lemma search on that, you get that PL with this lovingly hovering, but it still is an intense one. And so, I mean, you're right, Amanda. It just kind of draws you in. It's like, what exactly is that saying? Is this like the Spirit lovingly coming to the waters? Or is it the Spirit coming to the waters like the Spirit came to the waters of the Red Sea, splitting them? Because God is going to split the waters on day 2. But I don't know, it helps me, like you read that, and like it's you have access to, I don't know, maybe better questions. Maybe you can ask slightly better questions because you're reading it. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Amanda, or ask anyone, okay, you read this word as hayata. Hayata. And I want to ask you, why did you read it that way? Why not read it?
The answer is probably because of the speaker I've been listening to over and over.
So, and that's the perfect answer. The perfect answer. Because he clearly says it, hayata, right? But if someone said, no, you should say it hayta, why not read this first as a closed syllable? Why read it as open, short, closed?
Well, because well, never mind. Because a closed would have 2 consonants.
Well, couldn't the yod be the closing consonant?
Yeah. I don't know why you wouldn't read it that way.
It would have to be a patah.
And why would it have to? Why would it have to? You're absolutely right. It would have to be a patah. Why would it have to be a patah?
Because that's what would create the patah yod would create the diphthong, whereas the comments yod is not. Is that right?
That's right. So the rules that help me here is you cannot have a closed long syllable. If you've got a long vowel, that can't be in a closed unaccented syllable. And here's the accent. So if this were a closed syllable, the rule is you cannot have a long vowel in a closed unaccented syllable. But there's another reason why it has to be hayata. And it's because this word's a begad kafat. If this were a silent shva, what would be true of this word as a begad kafat? A begad kafat that starts a syllable has to have the dot. Since it doesn't have the dot, you know that the shva has to be an open syllable. So it has to be ha-yi-ta. But I don't know. I think I'm with Amanda. It's like the guy said it, the guy knows, I'm going to copy what the guy did. Because that's how we learn languages as children, right? We hear our parents speak and then we copy. And clearly he's saying hayata, but that's why he's doing it. Have we done the biblical theology behind tohu vabohu yet?
We did do that about the Jeremiah passage.
Yeah, the land after it had been destroyed. So that's course, Hoshek is almost always negative. Tehom is almost always negative. So the first positive thing that happens is the Spirit hovering over the faces of the water. One of my friends pointed out too that, why does it go the faces of the Tehom? And then here it's the faces of the waters. And I don't know. I don't know if that's just a stylistic thing or if there's some significance to that. And did we do the biblical theology behind Tehom, how that's translated in the Septuagint? Maybe we should. We have a minute for biblical theology, don't we? You tell me what you find interesting about this. Is anybody's Greek good enough to see how the word tehom, and the earth was unseen and unprepared, and darkness was on the face of the
abyss, Abusu.
The abyss. You know where this word appears elsewhere in the Bible? So I'm going to do a lemma search. Give me everywhere it appears. It appears lots of places, but this is the one I want us to look at first. Jesus, when he frees the Gadarene demoniac, the demons begged Jesus not to send them to the abyss. But this one's the one that's going to make you mad. How are they translating abyss here?
Bottomless pit.
Antonio, what do you find interesting about that? Do you find it interesting? Like even if you can't quite put your finger on why, do you find that interesting? It's like, why in the world don't they translate it the same way? Right? This is the ESV. This is the ESV. What have I just done to my English reader?
Anything that's two different things.
You can't connect them. But it's the same exact word, right? And do you find it interesting that when God makes original creation, the abusos is there? And demons are frightened beyond imagination that Jesus might send them to the abusos. And by the end of the story, what does God do to Satan? He throws him in the abusos. And I don't know if you've ever picked this up, but abusos, what abusos means in Greek is the bottomless place. The A is an alpha privative and the busos is like depth. So bottomless pit is a perfectly good translation. But do you see the symmetry that the beginning and end of the Bible both speak of the abusos? What do you make of that? And
It does tie together.
they have to be tied together somehow.
Yeah, it does tie the Bible together.
Have you made the connection that God splitting the waters at the Abusas is exactly like Moses splitting the waters at the Red Sea? Have you made that connection? And that dry land appears? That all of creation is kind of a mini, or wouldn't you say it the other way, that the crossing at the Red Sea is kind of a mini creation? God creating salvific space, holding back the Abusas. Like, what's holding back the waters of the Abusas right now? Is it the salvific space of Jesus? I'm not a Karl Barth fan at all. I think Karl Barth lived an immoral life, and there are lots of reasons not to be enamored with his teaching. But Karl Barth does make the connection between the rakia and Jesus. That Jesus is the salvific space creating creation where we can live and not be engulfed by the Abusas.
Pastor Davis, if I was a critical reader of scripture, could I not also say, though, that, well, Moses is writing this, even if I take a Moses authorship, Moses is just using his paradigm of what happened and applying that back to how he thinks the world began.
Yeah. And I mean, with any critical theory, there's a reason why people embrace it. Let me show you something here. I think I can do this, and actually it will not blank out. Oh, here we go. Do you see the Hebrew Bible in all those different colors? Okay, so you know what that is? That's if we believed in source criticism. Like, that's the J source, the E source, the D source, and the P source. Okay, so we're in Genesis 1. So what do you notice about 1:1 to 2:4 in terms of sources? Is it big enough for you to see that that's the priestly source? And then do you see how they say this is the lay source? And then this is the Yahwist source? Now, I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe source criticism is true for a second. But why do they call 1:1 to 2:4 the priestly source? And notice, they do every word as the priestly source. from 1:1 all the way to 2:4. They do it as the priestly source. Why did they do that?
Even they recognize it's temple language, maybe.
They recognized it was temple language.
Yeah.
So, is there any evidence that there were sources? Is there any external evidence that there were sources? There's zero evidence that there were sources. But it's possible, because of the religious, the time terms are all tied in with celebrating feast. So it seems to me the critical world is even picking up that there's something going on here. And I think what we do as believers is just say, okay, that's one possible solution. But, when you step back and look at a whole biblical theology, there is a tie with the very end of the book with these beginning themes. And part of why I love biblical theology so much is it's just beautiful. You start seeing the connections. Why does John tell me in Revelation that, there's no ocean in eschatological Jerusalem? And I go to Genesis 1 and I see that every single day when God creates something, he has the phrase, and God saw that it was good, except one day. The day he splits the ocean, day 2. God doesn't say that it was good. And while we're on that point, this A is textual variant, right? Do you see we have a textual variant here? So 7 says, and the waters which were above the Rakia and between the waters which were below the Rakia, and it was so. That's what B19A says. But then we've got A to A, and so we come down here and it says, look at verse 6, insert, and God saw that it was good, according to 4, 10, 12, 18, 21, 31, and verse 8, according to the Septuagint. So that's telling me there isn't any Hebrew manuscripts that have, and God said that it was good, but the Septuagint translator, or if it was a bunch of them, couldn't cope with the fact that God doesn't call day 2 good, so he inserted it, and God saw that it was good. But why would John tell me that eschatological Jerusalem has no ocean, has no night? Why would he say that? Well, Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was rhetorical.
No. I was asking.
Darkness and the ocean are typically symbols of judgment throughout Scripture.
And why would an eschatological Jerusalem have that?
It wouldn't, because judgment has already been meted out at that point.
Yeah. Critical scholars will say, well, he doesn't call day 2 good because, his work on day 2 isn't finished till day 3 when the dry land appears. Okay. Some people would say because, if if God is thinking forward to the Red Sea, and the Egyptians are perishing, that the idea of salvific space, which will be removed, people perishing in the abyss, that God can't call that good. I mean, those are all trying to explain the same facts, but are those explanations better or worse than John's? I think they're worse than John's, and John has a more beautiful, because it brings plot symmetry and a meta-narratival elegance to the story. And once you ever start reading it that way, it's going to get you. You look up this word, tehom, and I'll try to do it in Logos. It always takes me longer in Logos to do it, but we should learn. So you right-click it, and then you come on the pull-down menu, and you do a biblical word study, and let's make this one big. So what I did is I right-clicked on it. Let me see if I can find it now. Okay, it's right here. Okay, you guys can see this. So it'll tell you how to say it.
Tehom. Tehom.
That's nice. It will say flood, deluge, It will tell you how it's used in the Bible. And if you hover over it, it'll tell you what Hebrew words are being used. It will tell you where else it's used. And what do you notice about this word, the fountains of the great deep? What story is it in Genesis 7? What is Genesis 6 through 9? What story is that about? The fountains of the great deep breaking up. The fountains of the Tehom. What story is that?
Noah?
It's Noah. And we've got salvific space. We've got death on the outside. And we've got our same word, the abyss or the Tehom. Okay. So, do you have time for one more little bit of biblical theology? And I promise I'll quit. We're at Biblical Theology Anonymous. My name's Judd. I've been sober for about 17 seconds. Okay. So this is going to make you mad, I think. And then it's going to make you really happy that you're taking Hebrew. The Lord said to Noah, go into the ark. Here's our word. Go into the Tebah. Can anybody tell me where this word Tebah appears elsewhere in the Bible?
Is it the word used for the basket that Moses was in?
It absolutely is that word. In fact, that's the only two places it appears in the Hebrew Bible. It appears only in those two stories and nowhere else. And recall that the basket is covered over with pitch inside and out, just like the ark is covered with pitch. I wonder if this story is telling us that Moses' mother knew the Noahs, and she reasoned, if I have to throw my baby in the deadly waters, well, there's nothing to say I can't put him in an ark first. Now, if I say that the word ark only appears in the Noah's Ark story and in Exodus 2, is there a pushback to that statement that you might make?
Because you told me this before, I know where it appears, but I don't know if it's the same, carry the same meaning.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
The Ark of the Covenant.
So, the Ark of the Covenant this is the word. And this is where it's used, and it's used all these times in the Bible. Always of the Ark of the Covenant. The only place it isn't translated Ark of the Covenant is here. And how is it translated there?
Coffin.
Coffin. Why in the world would you put a coffin in the middle of the Holy of Holies? And is it okay if I leave you to think about that for next time? We'll do some biblical theology next time. And so you guys have been great. I'm really pleased with how you're doing. I'll send out a pre-video on Saturday. And we don't have class next Tuesday, do we? It's fall break, so get a week off. So I probably won't do the pre-video until a week from Saturday. I'm not saying that I'll probably be watching the Georgia-Auburn game. I mean, but I will be watching the Georgia-Auburn game. So thank you guys, and you're doing great, and I'll see you next week.